Hi everyone, today we're going to start lesson 3.2, the nervous system. The objective for today is that by the end of the lesson you should be able to describe the functions of the nervous and endocrine system and how they play an important role in impacting our behavior. So I would definitely copy down this chart. These are the divisions of the nervous system. So this is one of the ways that our body sends messages throughout its body, or throughout our body. There are two parts of the nervous system. We have the peripheral nervous system, and as you can see in this diagram here, the peripheral system covers all throughout your arms, down to your fingers, all the way down to your toes. Where over here we have the central nervous system. The central nervous system only comprises of your brain and the spinal cord. That is it. So your peripheral nervous system connects to your central nervous system, to your spinal cord, which then connects to your brain. So it goes peripheral, central, spinal, central, brain. So what does your peripheral system control? There's two parts of the peripheral system. There's the autonomic and the somatic. Autonomic is automatic. It happens automatically. You don't necessarily think about it. So things like your heartbeat, your glands, your digestion. So that's the automatic. You don't think about whether or not your food is digesting in your stomach. Now somatic does in fact is your voluntary movements, your skeletal muscles. So if you raise your arm up right now, the somatic nervous system is what is allowing that to happen. It's sending the message through your arm to your spinal cord up to your brain, which is saying move your right arm. Now underneath the automatically, things that happen to us automatically, we have two divisions. We have the sympathetic, no, that's not what I want to do. We have the sympathetic and we have the parasympathetic nervous system. These things, again, happen automatically. When you are under stress, when something happens to you, maybe something scares you, or you're just stressed out about school, the sympathetic nervous system will kick in. This arouses your body, and we'll talk about what that exactly means here in a minute. After that stressor is removed, the parasympathetic system comes in, and that's what calms you back down. So to show you what happens to your body with the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, we're going to take a closer look. So in the sympathetic, when we're in that fear or when we're in that stressed situation, your pupils are going to dilate, your heartbeat's going to accelerate, your stomach is going to slow down or stop digestion. Your liver, again, is going to slow down. We will see an increase in your adrenal glands. So you're going to see an increase of epinephrine and norepinephrine being released into your system. It can release the bladder, depending on exactly what happens. That can also happen. And yes, it can also stimulate ejaculation in males. The parasympathetic, when you calm back down afterwards, your pupils contract, your heartbeat slows, your digestion starts up again, which means that we start to see functioning in your liver and gallbladder. Your bladder will contract, and it again will allow blood to flow into your sex organs. So this is what happens in a situation where you are in what we call a fight or flight situation. So when you're stressed out about school, some of this may be enacted, but this is not an all or nothing situation. This can react with some of these things, whereas with some, it won't necessarily mean all of them. So for example, if you're really stressed out and your stomach kind of hurts and you don't want to eat anything, that could be because of the stress, right? And then the parasympathetic calms you back down. So again, the parasympathetic and sympathetic are a part of the autonomic nervous system. It's not something that you can control. It happens automatically. when you get stressed. Now, what you can control, though, is what stresses you out and healthy ways to deal and manage with stress, so that way your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system don't go into overdrive. Central nervous system, to get into a little bit more detail on that. We see a group of neurons. We call these neural networks, and they are in our brain. And we see these clusters of neurons that come together in a working group. And what we think is happening is the reason why this happens is because it allows for short and fast connections between neurons that may do similar things or may do things that relate to one another. Your spinal cord is what connects the central nervous system to the peripheral nervous system. And part of that is what we call a reflex. A reflex is an automatic response to a stimulus. And this is a great image down here to kind of go into more detail about that. If you touch a flame or something hot, it triggers your skin receptors, which works with the sensory neurons to send information into your brain. The sensory neurons then communicate through an interneuron. So the interneuron connects neurons together. So this sensory neuron connects to an interneuron, which now is connected to a motor neuron, which tells you, hey, that's hot, I should pull my hand back. Now, this probably happens so fast that you don't even realize it's happening. I mean, think about it. When you touch something, you don't touch it and say, oh, it's hot, I should move my hand. You touch it and you jerk your hand back immediately. And that's because it's a type of a reflex that's happening. The sensory neurons are communicating with your motor neurons in a fraction of a second. The last part of the nervous system that we're going to focus on is actually the endocrine system. And this is where we have our glands. So you may think about glands when you go to the doctor's office and they feel your throat to see if your glands are swollen. Those are those glands. That's what we're looking at. Your endocrine system is considered the slow system. If the nervous system and neurons communicate in fractions of a second, the endocrine system might take a second or two to communicate. So when we say slow, it's still pretty fast, but slower than the neurons communicate. And they communicate with hormones, which are chemical messages that travel through the bloodstream. So neurotransmitters are also chemical messages that travel through a neuron. And the endocrine system has hormones which travel through the blood. Hormones and neurotransmitters can do some of the same jobs. However, neurotransmitters are much quicker. Hormones might last a little bit longer. So this is why we can say that maybe our feelings still feel hurt or we still feel upset about something even though we may not be quite too sure what that is. It's because the hormones are still lasting in your system. Your adrenal gland, which is right here, so it's that little yellow thing right there, it's right above your kidneys. This is what's responsible for your fight or flight. So when we talked about your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, your adrenal gland also works in addition with that. They work together to prepare your body for fight or flight. And the pituitary gland, which is right here, so in the center of your brain, is really what we call the master gland. And the reason why we call it the master gland is because it actually controls the other glands. So if something happens and your thyroid, for example, needs to be activated, which this is what controls your metabolism for when you digest food and turn it into energy, then that pituitary gland is going to target that thyroid gland and tell it to go into action. In addition to writing down these notes over here, I would also make sure you understand what these different glands are responsible for doing. So we have the pituitary gland, which is the master gland. It affects other glands and hormones. Your hypothalamus is actually what controls that, though. So it's a part of your brain. It controls the pituitary gland. We have the thyroid. This affects metabolism and how you burn food into energy. Parathyroid regulates the level of calcium in your blood. Adrenal, we said, is fight or flight. Pancreas is what regulates the level of sugar in your blood. And then we have ovaries and testes, which are responsible for the sex hormones in both female and males, respectively. And that is it for today.